Okay. To the parents out here who are doing due diligence, who have watched the traumatic events unfold, who have had to have these conversations with their children and felt unequipped, but felt that they had to say something, to the parents that have taken their children out to protest, to the parents that have made videos, who have spoken up, I commend you. And I want you to know we appreciate you. We appreciate the work that you're doing. Because I want you to know that this work that you are doing has little reward. It has oftentimes more backlash and consequence than it ever will reward. You're not going to get a pat on the back. You're not going to be acknowledged. But I want you to know that the work that you're doing has an impact and will change something. And I'm seeing mothers and fathers crying. I'm seeing police officers whose hearts are breaking. I'm seeing council members. I see a future president who's out there on the front lines. I see all kind of stuff happening that let me know that we have hearts to love and we have hearts to heal this nation. To my white friends that have reached out to me, I love you and I appreciate you for saying something and standing up, for taking the time to teach your children. And to the pastors that have went out and have taken a stance on where they stand, we appreciate you. To the doctors, to the businesses, to the government officials, to the police chiefs, all of you that have made a stand and have made a choice, I appreciate that. And I am grateful because all it takes really is for you to lead by example. And I have seen some major examples set. The people in different communities out there, we see you. So I want to start with our children. Our children are our future, y'all. They are our next leaders. They are the next presidents and senators and governors and mayors. These are the decision makers that are going to make the decision whether or not we will have Social Security, what laws are in place to protect us, what laws are being undone that are still protect us, where we stay at, will we have a nursing home, assistant facility, can we stay in our homes? These are our future leaders. And I just don't understand how we are not putting more time and investment into our little people. We cannot keep waiting until they're teenagers to start teaching them this stuff. Now is the time. It is your job and my job as parents to teach our little people how to love, the basic thing of love, because when love goes, it's hard to dehumanize, it's hard to materialize, and it's hard to make anybody your property when you love that person. And that's the only way that this country has gotten here. That's the only way that the slave trade happened, is that they had to teach themselves to hate and to dehumanize people. That was the only way to make that work and to make them their property. That's the only way to make the prison systems work, is if we can get ourselves to believe that they are less than us, we can get them to do free labor for us. So what I'm trying to teach you is don't wait till our kids are older and say, now we can have this conversation and be very liberal. And now we can teach our babies. No. Teenagers, they're set in their ways. And if anybody has raised kids or teenagers, you will know. And you know what I'm talking about. They're set in their ways, kind of dang near at that point. So it starts now. You have a responsibility. So I'm going to start with my own story, and then we're going to walk through this and we're going to make it very, very easy. So we're going to talk about how to process the traumatic events that have happened. And I'm going to call them traumatic because I know for me, I've been having a traumatic response, even though I couldn't put two and two together. So we're going to get to that in a minute. So the first things first, it's never too early to have a conversation with your children. I'm having this conversation right now with my three sons who are 4, 6, and 7. I've been having this conversation with them since the oldest was 3. He became very aware of mistreatment and things that were going on. So just to encourage you on the question that I've seen being asked quite often is how early is too early? It's not too early, unfortunately. This is the time, and start as soon as they're able to start comprehending things, but it also is going to be critical in how you socialize them in the earlier ages. So with my daughter who's now 1, it is important that I am doing small things to keep her encouraged and confident in who she is and teaching her at an age appropriate level. So for our 0 to 4-year-olds, it's going to be very important that you socialize your children to be inclusive. So a good way to do that is through books, the words that you introduce your children to, the toys you choose. So it's a doll, if it's some of the characters that are going on, is being very aware to make sure that there's different people, different shapes, different sizes that are included in your children's toys. That's going to be very, very important for content, right? So we are going to one day put on TV for that 0 to 4-year-old group. So for example, I use Sesame Street, Sesame Street has for many, many years been a staple and has set the bar pretty high to be very inclusive. And so it's one of my favorite shows for my children because it is very intentional to show brown skin, dark skin, red baby, purple baby. It shows all different shapes, sizes, and it actually has seasons and episodes that are specific to the different issues that are going on. So whether it's a language barrier, hair, or skin, it talks about those things. So be very aware of what shows you choose for your children if you want your child to be inclusive at a very young age. The imagery that you show them is going to be critical. So for 0 to 4, it's very simple. Just what you choose, what information you use, what content you expose them to, and what things they're listening to. So those are going to be critical. Another piece for the 0 to 4 that is going to be very important is who's in your social network. Who are your kids exposed to? Is going to be very, very important. So do they only see you? So for me, I always use myself as the example. For my 1-year-olds right now and my 4-year-old, so I have 2 that are in this category, I have a family that is very blended. So Mexican, Samoan, Asian, we got it all actually. Indian, white, so we have it all. So I'm intentional to bring my child around those people and have those people around us so that my kids are being socialized to know what community looks like and what their community on the outside really does look like. I've been living in Seattle my whole entire life, born and raised, went to school here, and I've never not once seen an all black Seattle. It's not, or all white Seattle. It's not. It's very blended and mixed. So I'm very intentional on putting my kids around other people that look different than me. And that's going to be important. And it's going to be hard, and it's going to take intentional choices to do it, right? So if you're used to only being around your white friends and your white family, you have to get up and make a choice to reach out to other people that look different than you to include your children in that. And so it's, and same thing with like age. If you don't want your kids to be afraid of an old, they call them old granny, bring them around other people who are older, right? So my children are not scared of anyone with gray hair because we have adopted, we call them adopted grandmas that are in their lives that look different. right? So it is going to be a choice that you have to make sure that you expose them to other things. All right, that's our 0 to 4 group. We're going to move to the older group. So this is the second part that we want to talk about, the second age group. So we have 0 to 4 that we just covered. We're now going to cover our 5 to about 10-ish. And please know this is just my observation and my experience working with children and having these conversations, right? And so, and I've had these conversations, I've facilitated many conversations, mainly with adults. But here recently, prior actually to coronavirus happening, we were launching a series, and I'm so excited to be able to share it with you because it's going to be coming as soon as we're able to gather again. And it's going to be exactly what is going to help be a tool for you parents like me who just need extra support, because we are in this together, and it's not one person that can teach all the things that we need to teach. So for our 5 to about 10-ish, we're going to say, the first thing that I've done with my children, so I have 2 sons that are in the age group. I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. My 7-year-old, we call him the professor. He's very advanced in terms of content and his way of absorbing and reflecting. So I have to kind of go with his style. And my 6-year-old, he's an observer. He watches everything, and he doesn't say anything until asked. So one's very opinionated and watches the content and is very detailed and wants to know what's going on. The other just watches, says nothing, and observes everything. And then when he's asked, he's full of stuff. So one thing I'm going to tell you as a parent, a mother or a father, is there's no one size fits all for our children. Every child is different. My 4 children are all very different. Their personalities are very different. The way that I have to teach them is I'm like, this is so hard, are very different. And so with that personality difference, I have had to be very intentional on how I talk to them. So know your children, take time to understand their learning style, right? Some are good with you talking to them. Others want you to show them. Others want you to guide their conversation. The other one may not. So first thing first is acknowledge what kind of child you have. Know that it's going to be different for each child if you have more than one. And then there's the work that you have to do first. So the first thing I'm going to say is, in the events that have been happening on the news, you first must acknowledge where you stand. You need to make a stance. Whether you think the killing of George Floyd was right or wrong. No gray area. Pick whether you believe it was right or wrong. That's it. So in terms of words, please don't say any gray area. When you have this conversation with your child, you need to be clear. So for example, with me, I said to my children, I believe the killing of George Floyd was wrong. That's it. There's nothing else to it. I didn't give any other opinion. I believe it's wrong, children. The second part of that, and it's going to be depending on what stance you've taken. But either way, I think this will tell you where you stand. The second part of that is then, in my case, I had to validate that not only was it wrong, but validate the hate that has happened as a result of this, the anger and the pain of the people that were impacted by this. The first thing I had to do was process to my children that I am angry and that I am upset, and mommy is so frustrated that this keeps happening, and mommy gets scared when daddy leaves the house. Mommy gets scared to ever think of sending you guys to the park to play. To ever. I can't even see that coming anytime soon. How mommy gets scared when she thinks about her brothers. and her community. So I had to validate the pain and the anger that I was feeling first and foremost with my children. And I think, and if I'm a white parent, it's going to be a little different. But I hope you will do the same and say, you know what, children, this is why the people are mad. The people are mad because brown people are being killed. Black people in particular are disproportionately being killed, children. The people that are outside protesting are angry and they're in pain. Acknowledge that and validate that. That's what you can do as a parent. Okay, so the next part, which is the third piece, is to help your children understand what is going on right now in America. If they've been watching the news with you, they will see that it's filled with very peaceful, beautiful protests. It is filled with violent riots and looting. And it's filled with good reporters and bad reporters. It is filled with a one-sided angle that shows only the negative parts of the protest, that it is missing and excluding white supremacists and Confederate flags and anti-Black people that are out there causing disruption, that it's filled with people holding rifles, that it's filled with people holding batons in combat gear. When they are watching this with you, you have to go in now and explain to them what is going on. The first part of that is, what is a protest? Help them answer that question. And if you don't know the answer to that, I'm going to challenge you to go and look that up. What is a protest? What is the purpose of the protest? And how does it work to create change? I also think it's a great idea to go back and find some material. So there's some movies, there's a couple of kids shows, there's some books, there's plenty of stuff on YouTube that will show the kids some other protests and some other demonstrations and help them to connect the dots. So help them to connect the dots of, my favorite, of course, is the Civil Rights Movement and the protests that happened then. I have helped them now connect the dots to the change that resulted from the civil rights protest. So this is going to be so key, and it's going to be critical because we are standing right now in the thick of history. This is going to be one of the most historic protests ever, right? And it just gets me fired up. We are on day 8 of protest, and I'm so proud of everybody that has been out there supporting. So tell them the value, how it works, and how it works to create change. If you're like me, I love visuals. So for me, I helped connect the dot, showed them what civil rights protests were and what the outcome was. You can draw a map on the whiteboard, you can put it on a piece of paper, you can show them a video. But we can say they protested because they wanted to not have to be excluded from everything. So desegregation was the main goal. The outcome was we later were desegregated. Help them to see the connection so that they can see the importance of what's going on right now. So with the current situation, these protests are happening, and we hope that the goal is then police accountability and systemic change in the criminal justice system. Those are the intended outcomes that these protests are happening. Police accountability and a criminal justice reform. Protests now to get reform later, in restoration and reconciliation between police and communities of color. That's the goal. The other part of that is going to be really important is there's so many terms that are being shown on TV, right? The word racism. I've heard Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. I've also been hearing riots, looting. They need to know what these words mean because they're being exposed to them. And we have a responsibility to help them to understand these things. Why? It's important because one day they may be in a position where they have to go in and do the same thing. Or they're going to be in a conversation with their kids, with their friends, at school. Or they're around you as you talk about it. So the best thing to do is I'm going to give you parents a little bit of homework. Write the most commonly heard words and go and look them up and share those definitions with them in a kid-friendly manner. And don't filter. They need to know what it is. And I have been helping my children. I've had to be so creative in how to help them with these words. And I'm going to continue this series because I'll help you in the next series, part 2, I guess, to help you to have these conversations. And I also think my children have been exposed to the news, and I kept telling myself, oh, I'm going to turn this off. But I couldn't help but want to watch it. And they would play, but they would come back and watch it. They've seen me and their dad watching certain videos or reading content and dialoguing a lot. I mean, it has dominated our last 10 days in a certain way. And so all this content they've been exposed to. Be careful that when you're exposing them to this, that you leave it with them. If you're going to expose them to it, sit down with them, process it, talk about it with them. Because what you don't want is what happened to me. And I'm going to explain that. So last Monday, I read it, started reading it. I didn't even realize it almost became, I'm going to use the word addictive and hope it doesn't trigger anybody, but just I became so ingrained and watched every little alert that came across my phone. Watched every video. Then, friends started posting and And I'm not on social media a lot. So I actually only went on social media every other day because I don't regularly go on there often, but I found myself wanting to go and see what people are saying. What are people doing? Are people responding? And then, so as of right now, I haven't been on there in 2 days because I had to limit how much content. Because what I found is that by day 4, my body and my stomach was in knots. Literally in knots, you guys. And I kept telling my husband, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm just having like a panic attack or anxiety attack. But my mind feels fine, but my body feels like my heart's going to explode. But guess what? I was internalizing the trauma. I was internalizing the anger. I was internalizing these protests and not processing them. I thought I was processing them with him by talking about it, but we were not really processing this. And I had to go and find an activity, and we'll talk about some of those activities in the next series, to help undo and get out these kinks that were in my stomach, the heart pounding and the rage and the anger that kept my throat tightening. These are really real, you guys. So in order to help guide this conversation, I want you to pay attention to how you are responding. Because if I just gave the example of the tension and the physiological response my body was having, even though mentally I felt like I was taking care of myself, I felt like I was praying for me. That was a great tool. I was writing stuff down. I was journaling, but I was having some physiological responses. What I really didn't notice and take caution of is that tension that was building was spreading to my family and my children. And then guess what? When I went to talk to my children later that night, they were like, Mom, I hate the police. I want to kill them. That is not what Mommy's trying to portray at all. That is not the answer, baby. So in that moment, I realized that even though I never said those words, my husband never said those words, Nowhere on the TV did it say that word. The looting and the damages of police cars, the visual of police against people, the tension and the anger that I had that this just happened, and I'm just like, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. That message to them was, then we should kill police. We should hate the police. And I hate to even say this online, but I'm going to say it because that was a message that it sent to my children. Because they, in their mind, thought if we take these people out, this fixes the problem and this fixes mommy's anger. But in no way, let me fix this so I can make sure y'all seeing. In no way was that the message that I ever wanted to send to my children. And so that's when I realized that there's probably more parents like me who have been watching this and are passionate about it, but have not been careful to watch what the impact on our children is. One thing I have learned in being a mom, and I've been a mom for many, many, many years. I've raised my children, and I've also raised 4 other children prior to this. And I have my other bonus children too, who I love. And what I've realized in raising children is that we have to be aware of not only what we say and what we do, because our children are watching us. So no matter how many times I can tell my child, don't think like that, don't say that. If my example is modeling something other than what I'm telling them, 9 times out of 10, they're going to do what they see, not what they're told. As parents, you and I have a responsibility to make sure that the behavior, the language, the content, all of it that we do in front of our children models what we really want them to do. Because no matter how many times you tell them, baby, don't say that, don't think that, they're watching. And that will become their response. And this is how the system has been able to stay in place for many, 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 many years. It stayed in place because not only were parents weren't saying, Johnny, you need to go hate those black people. That's probably not what was happening. It was the gestures in the store. It was don't speak to them, or just not speaking to the person at all. It was saying rude comments behind closed doors, calling people out their names behind closed doors, telling them, you know who's boss. We're here and there. That what was going on behind closed doors, right? Or, gosh, just never bringing up a black person. Those gestures show your children, mommy and daddy don't like black people. They don't have any black friends. We don't live anywhere near anyone who looks different than us. Those messages is what perpetuate the system. I doubt it was a lot of intentional, you hate black people, kill them. There was probably some of that too. But I'm saying all that to say is that kids are looking at us and we have a responsibility. So be careful of how your body is responding, where your emotional state is, where your physiological body is, where you're spiritually at, where you're mentally at. Process these feelings, process the pain, process the anger, and then start to strategize on what you can do to be a part of this solution. So that was a long piece. And now we're going to go to the next phase. All right? And it's really simple in this step. It's talk to your children. And we talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to tell you what really has worked for me. When I'm talking to my children, I just get quiet. Depending on which child I'm talking to, I ask a question and then I'm quiet as I listen. And I listen I hear them out, whether I agree with them or not. So like I shared with you earlier, my son told me what he had processed and that he hated police. And I listened. And you have to learn to listen without interrupting, whether you agree with them or not. Because I was getting to jump on them and I was getting ready to just like, what? No. But the key here is ask the question and listen. And they're going to ramble a little bit. And then you know how to coach them through the conversation, like how to truly listen and then to help them to continue the dialogue. So, for example, he said, I don't like police. And I listened to him, the other stuff he said. And then I said, okay, let's talk about that further. Why do you feel that way? And then he began to unload. So learn to be strategic in your follow-up questions, but in a way that says, I have fully heard what my child is thinking and how he has processed all that is going on. They're going to hit you with questions. I mean, they're going to unload a lot of questions. And I've been unloaded with so many questions. So the best approach is, one, to acknowledge the question. I hear you. And they're looking to you to answer. If you don't know the answer to the question, the best thing that you can do is tell them, you know what? I don't know the answer to that question. And sometimes there may not be an answer to a question. It may just be an opinionated answer. Or there actually may be a factual answer. So first thing, if it's an opinionated answer, you are going to have to be very, very careful on how you answer that question, because it could do further damage. So be careful and strategic how you answer the questions that your children are asking. The second part is if it's a factual answer. So for example, what is a protest? That is a factual answer. If you don't know the answer, acknowledge you don't know the answer and don't try to answer it. Instead, go do what Sesame Street tells you to do. Go and look it up. Go look it up. Go educate yourself. Ask someone. Because we have to be careful to not answer any questions that we don't know the answer to, because we could further cause harm and damage. And this goes for whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're Asian, whether you're Samoan. Be careful how you answer these questions, because the goal is reconciliation within these communities. The goal is reconciliation with the criminal justice system, right? With law enforcement. The goal is not to further cause a divide and create more hate. That is not the goal here, at least not my goal. So be careful how you do it. The other part is to see this always as a learning opportunity. You have to see this as an opportunity to grow your children and an opportunity to grow yourself. If you are like me, I encourage you to partner with your children. Your children are your reflection. They are a little you. So I want my kids, I always tell my kids, I want you to be way better than me, way greater than me, to go do way more than I ever could do, right? See this as an opportunity. And I want you to know that our kids are looking to us. They don't know what to do right now in the middle of the situation. They feel helpless at this point. They feel like they are just watching this stuff. They might even have been out there in the protest, but they don't know what to do with that and what the next steps are. Because when the protests end, what are you going to do? Are we going to just write it in the history books and be done with it and go back to normal? Because I want you to know the normal for all of us is different. For Black people, this is still our story. There is no going back to normal. This is our normal. I also know that for my white folks, my friends, my loved ones, and you know who you are, You get the privilege of going back to not having to see all this riots, going back to the downtown, riding the bus again, going to the freeways. You get to go back to that normal. But I am challenging you to not go back to normal. I am challenging you to teach your children, teach yourself how to love people, how to love all people, and to become an extra voice, specifically for the groups that are being oppressed and marginalized. And in this situation, Black people, especially Black men, are being killed and marginalized by the criminal justice systems and have been dehumanized since being brought here to this land. We cannot go back to normal. We need your help to undo what has happened. And if you can make that commitment with me, we will walk alongside each other. We will strategize together. We will break bread together, continue to break bread to love one another. But I need for you not to quit now, to not go back to normal. I need for you to say, it's going to cost me some friends and family, but I can't just sit back and hate and fear of a people that have not done anything to me. I can't just sit back and watch a system just take them out and pluck them out one by one. I can't, and I won't sit back and do that. And we need you. So stay tuned. Follow me for the next series. I love y'all. I really, really do. I love people, and I love y'all, and I love my community. And it wouldn't be the same without you. So I look forward to the next one. We'll see ya.